Hey, good morning there, YouTubers. This is one of my classic slideshow YouTubes. I have a house guest, Deb, and I'm going to show her the gallery after I pick her up at the Benson Hotel. She's a medical doctor, medical ethicist, knows a lot about some issues. When you're a medical ethicist, okay, there's several populations. There's patients. We all think of ourselves first as patients, usually when you hear about, medical ethicists, it's like, oh, something about, tough case patients. Of course, but also the staff, doctors, supporting the doctors, supporting the nurses, supporting everybody in a hospital setting, because that can be difficult work. It can lead to, just they're as mortal and as prone to illness as anyone, doctors. All right, so going on. This was leaving Carol, or leaving Carol's with me. We're leaving, Carol's my mother, leaving Embry Hall out in Cornelius Pass, Oregon, which is one of the McMinimans. And now we are, what are we doing here? Oh, John Lilly. Glenn is reading this guy's stuff. Not to be confused with Timothy Leary, but nevertheless an early, what we could say, acid head, I suppose. That sounds pejorative, so, but I'm not being pejorative. He studied dolphin language, or dolphin, right? So, in terms of being an Apollonian, like if you're into rationality and the god Apollo, if you're into Greek mythology, then Apollo is the Delphian. He's somebody who, okay, I was going to rotate this as part of my sharing, but I'm seeing I'm not even signed in, which is kind of annoying. And we'll see if I can get in here. It thinks it knows the password. Let's see if it's right. Okay. All right. It's not as hard as it sometimes could be. This is the Halloween season, and so that we go to eerie, creepy, or spooky places just right out of the bat, that's okay. That's something that happens. I like abandoned industrial sites, this kind of thing. This is something I like. Okay, so let's just go back to where we were, if possible. When we get to it, okay, I've changed my mind. I'm going to go in reverse chronological order. Let's just go straight to the gallery. As was yesterday, I have the key. Deb and I went here from her medical ethicist conference at the Benson Hotel, which is where Bucky Fuller stayed, according to Trevor. Now, the way I have people learning about, say, this lattice is I'm very interested in illuminating each one, and I do this around my house, and having them be very, very small if necessary, or very far apart and floating underwater, perhaps. Either way, you could think of the underwater ones as also the model for a very, very small. The fact that we do have members running physically to all the balls, in other words, you don't have to use Wi Fi or something like that. There's like a way to get a pipe, you could say, to every ball. So when you need something like that, you need a conduit to every location and not just Wi-Fi, not just radio. You've got that here. And it both doubles as, right, holding everything in place. You need to hold things in place rigidly relative to one another. That's what the strut arms do. However, you also can use the strut arms to take content to and from. In the terms of they being that they exist now, they can take wire or whatever you need. Depends on the scale you're thinking at. If you're thinking, putting fish inside, each one is like a fishbowl, or are they bigger? Maybe each one has got a whole city inside, and this is out in space somewhere. Okay, so anyway, beautiful setup, good sense of um, maximal use of the space. Some of these I don't ever get to see hardly, so there's the industrial flavor of it. It's both art and yet there's the feeling of industry, mass produced, You know, there's a whole industry behind this. It's like, wow, and yet is this art? And it's just, I think, unsettling in a good way. It gets people really. So I'm just here with Deb. We're looking around. I've got one set of lights on in the back, which I'll turn off. And then in the front, they just permanently have the lights on, showing what's called the hollow wave, or I think that's the name of it. Okay, on a metal stand here. So again, computer memory is a good example. If you remember, okay, so here's the lattice again. We're looking closely at the hollow wave. I helped build a little bit of it. It's very much hollow wave, that's right. Very much Sam's inspiration because we didn't know what he wanted until he told us what to do. So Deb is not a very heavy person, so her not crushing this thing and standing on it, showing a street behind her, um, that makes sense that she wouldn't go crashing through. But even a bigger, heavier person such as myself can stand on this, and Sam jumps on it and shows us. And this is copper version. In other words, what he's worked on, and he's showing it as the copper roof of a church. The implication being you can use this stuff in highly decorative ways. It can be ornamentation, not just structural, right? And so Deb is kind of astounded by all this. This is the rusted steel version. It's just in a way, it's a study in properties, chemical properties. Now, would you really want it underwater as part of a coral reef? Well, maybe at Disneyland, right? Or out in the wild. Sam's got a lot of marine biology background. It might seem like he just has no experience in streets or street design or marine bio, but it's not true. He's worked in both industries. He's got a very wide background. I'll stop with, I'll end this with one more Sam story. Sam being the Sam Lanahan, the guy behind this gallery and this invention, Flextegrity, is his family knew Bucky Fuller. Well, they knew Bucky, but they also knew the Applewhites in D.C. And Ed knew Jared, for example. Not Ed. Ed's Jared's dad. Sam knew Jared and got as an invitation at one point when Fuller was looking for someone like a sidekick, someone to help him through the ordeal, the fun, whatever, of going to the Philippines. Sam got to be that person and sort of accompanied Bucky to Malacanang, which is where the Marcoses were, and was a guest of the Marcos family. And yes, Imelda did want to help them get better shoes, so they did have a motorcade downtown. Now, I learned all this later from Sam himself. However, it turns out I was in the Philippines right at the same time going to high school because our family got there. I think in 71, that was the summer after we'd been in Ramallah with the swimming pool enterprise. We built, like we were with the Quaker organization, building very. It was the Boris Spassky versus Bobby Fischer match that summer, and we were building a very hard to build swimming pool out of solid rock from scratch, and didn't finish it in my period there. And that summer we went on to. We were pulling up stakes in Rome at the time. That had been my home for all of like middle school, most of elementary school. Since third grade forward, I lived in Rome all through eighth grade, and now I'm starting high school, but who knows where, because Dad is looking for a new assignment. So we might end up. He's a freelancer too, so it's not like you just go to the government and say, "I'm ready for a new assignment." Never had that. So he got some very eclectic work. We ended up in the Philippines after this, and that's where so from Rome to the Philippines by way of Bradenton, Florida. So I did start my high school in Southeast High, Bradenton, Florida. Came back here to Portland late in my, not late, in my early adulthood, in my late 20s. I returned to Portland. Okay, so that's the gallery, and oh, and let me finish with who's Deb. Deb's a very good friend, although I don't see her very much. She doesn't live anywhere around here. She's just come back from Spain and the Middle East, Israel, Palestine, all that, Jerusalem, and she's just up here in Portland for a conference, and she's formerly she was married to my friend Russ, who is very much into the same sort of lattice that Sam is into. There's a picture somewhere of Sam standing next to Bucky Fuller, but in any case, Russ and I used to talk, hours about the isotropic vector matrix here, which is another term for octet truss, which is what Alexander Bell was into, and it's not anything new or mysterious to crystallographers or chemists or geometers. What's new and different about Sam's way of doing it is it's built for architects to think about and use. It's a structure. That was Alexander Graham Bell too, but he didn't hold the balls in place using this method that Sam does, which is quite unique and has its own ups and downs. Mainly, everything's very sturdy and held in place very strongly. It's not like there's a lot of wiggle room. It wants to correct itself. There's a natural tendency, given imperfections, for things to stray from the straight and narrow, you could say. And flextegrity, because long term it has to hold together in exactly the isotropic vector matrix. All these sphere centers, even though they're not touching, right? Someone looking at this, they're like, well, that's not the isotropic vector matrix. Those balls don't even touch each other. That's true. You think of them as the nucleus inside bigger balls that you don't see but that do touch each other. Just mentally add that. I'm not saying superstitiously believe that. I'm saying mentally this is still the CCP. Yes, the balls have shrunk a bit, but they're all inside a cube, alternating occupied and unoccupied cubes with rhombic dodecahedra in the occupied cubes, and actually penetrating into their neighbors has been a subject of many videos, and also the 4 IVMs that Russ and I talked about. Russ was really clear on how, like, even just starting with the rhombic dodecahedron, you can visualize 4 distinct octet trusses that interpenetrate based on selective illumination. And that's the kind of thing I think about when I look at this stuff. And I address all of these balls in space mathematically, unique address wise. I could give them what we call quadre coordinates, which are 4 positive integers with and zeros, non-negative integers. 4 non-negative integers uniquely connecting to each of these, and an algorithm to go, if you wish, from those 4 integers to the XYZ coordinates. In other words, it's sufficient information given a shared origin. The caltrop coordinates are sufficient to power the XYZ algorithm to spit back, standard XYZ, where is this place, and vice versa, right? We can go back and forth. However, I take the opportunity in going back and forth also to scale the quadrats so that the unit tetrahedron that they describe has unit volume and goes Bucky's way. Because you recall, if you're finally, I'm finishing, a scholar and know this channel well, that a super main innovation in synergetics, which is Bucky's he decided to brand his thinking as an X, something like cybernetics, Dianetics. Now, it's not Dianetics, right? And that might have been, maybe people, when they hear synergetics, they're thinking, oh, Dianetics. But, it's an X, true. And so in this X, we study the isotropic vector matrix, how it's kind of the home base of kind of energy at rest, you could say. It's kind of a rest position if you need one. If you're going to have one, you might as well have it be this or something like this in terms of a visual home base. And let's see, I was going to finish with the quadrays, and let's see, I think that's it. I think I've got everything in there that I need to. I think we could go on to a next video and talk more about, this shape, the CCP, 4 IVMs, and so on. Check back. They're not in the future, but in the past. I've already done the videos of which I speak. Go take a look, and we'll talk to you soon.